I am Audrey Johnson, and this is On the Couch with Audrey J. Jacqui Thompson, Rutz Arzate, and Lisa Chamblee work with Prince in business, making music, and other endeavors. They share their challenges and successes and how the legacy has impacted them. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the very first episode of On the Couch with Audrey J. Today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor of speaking with not one, not two, but three phenomenal women who were very instrumental and impactful at various times during Prince's career. Jacqui Thompson, PRN Alumni Foundation President, Music Industry Executive, Entrepreneur. Rutz Arzate, Prince's Manager, Director of Operations, and I like to call her the Queen of Atmosphere. And Lisa Chamblee, Recording Engineer and Entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Buenos dias.
So let's just get comfy on the couch as we just start to unpack the pieces and parts of Prince's legacy that impacted each of you and sort of kind of where we're going in the future. So what were you doing prior to joining Prince, and was he even on your radar?
Who wants to dive into that one? For me, it's Jacqui. I think Prince has always been on the radar musically for me since I started playing music, and back, he was definitely influential in that sense. So he was always on the radar. I didn't necessarily think that he was on the radar to work for, other than I thought that he was an amazing producer and musician and that. And then as I, started working with him, I saw a lot of other elements of him that were pretty incredible. What I was doing before, I actually lived in Michigan, played in a band, played music, really was trying to decide where I wanted to go. I knew it was going to be music industry, business side. I didn't really have the urge to be on stage for the rest of my life. And doing that, I didn't have that kind of calling. I'd love to play, but I didn't have that. So I knew it was going to be, I was always the one putting the branding and packaging together and sending it out and getting in touch with A&R people. And it was just something natural that would kind of flow for me. So I knew that's the direction I wanted to go through. And I went to university for a couple of years. They didn't have the opportunities that I think that there is out there today for me, at least, business and music. There wasn't really any type of schooling and instruction and that. So I just kind of was winging it, trying to figure out where I was going to go. And a couple years into university, I decided this was not going to get me where I wanted to be in my life. And so I dropped out and got a job at a radio station in Detroit. And that was the start of my musical journey. And as I was going every a couple days into the radio station to do, the internship stuff that you do. There was a little record label sign outside one of the doors on the hall to the radio station. And one day I decided to knock on the door. I was just like, okay, it's time for me to do that. A guy opened the door up. We started talking. I said, hey, do you have an opening for internships? Of course, free work. They're going to take it. And so I started working there. And this guy had owned a bunch of George Clinton Parliament masters. And so he would license overseas the music, in different territories. And so I learned about masters very early on, even before the importance of masters, even before Prince rammed it into your head that about masters and ownership, it was important. That's the essence of longevity musically for artists. And so I had already known about that. I had already started doing licensing and learning about different territories and that, MIDAM, which is a big music conference, I was a part of early on. And so anyway, long story short, migrated up to Minneapolis. I was trying to choose if I was going to go to LA or New York. And I decided to go to Minneapolis. I went up to do a show, loved it, fell in love with the city, fell in love with the people, the musicians, and I decided to network up there. Didn't have really aspirations as far as working at Paisley Park. I was working at a really cool, I'd done different things. I wanted to get into management. And I had started working. I wanted to know all aspects of music, so I started working at a club called Biscuits and Blues, and booking, national acts, blues acts like Etta James and Sugar Blue, and became friends with different musicians around town. Mike Scott was a great friend. He called me one day and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity to work out at Paisley Park in the merchandise section, 1-800-NEW-FUNK." And, I put your name in the pot. I was like hesitant, talked to my mom. My mom said, maybe you should go check it out. Went, called him back, said, yeah, I'll be interested. Got the gig, and then just worked my way up from there. I worked with Maite and did the MPG Dance Company, then worked with him. And then it grew. I started running his MPG Records and running Paisley Park during 96 through mid 2000. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of amazing experiences. So that was kind of my journey quickly, and hopefully not too long. Sorry. So,
but what sort of brought you to Minneapolis? Like how did you get there when you were deciding between New York and California? How did you end up just saying, okay, Minneapolis is now in the mix?
Yeah, I had sent a demo tape to Perspective Records, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, but I called before I sent the demo, and I weaved my way into talking to the A&R person. Her name was Sonia Cates at the time. I'm really good friends with Sue Owens now and Debbie Morrison, but Sonia was head of A&R. So I weaved my way into talking to her. And she said, sure, send the demo. I sent it. About a week later, I sent the package. And then about a week later, she called me back and said that she really liked the demo. She's going to let Jimmy and Terry hear it. And, pretty cool. She was a percussionist, so we had mutual things in common. I played drums. And while, they were kind of interested in us, but she said, hey, you should come up to, meet. They're doing a panel with the Black Music Awards with Pete Rhodes. You should come up and check it out. And so I drove up, packed up a couple band members, and we drove up and we went to the Black, there was a music conference and then the Black Music Awards. And so I weaved my way into meeting Pete Rhodes, and actually we became friends. And I met Jimmy that night, and I ended up in, I don't know, I remember how it happened, in Jimmy Jam's limo with Ralph Tresvant and a guy named Buzz Willis. And it was just me and another band member and myself and Jimmy and Ralph. And they were going to record that night, I think Stone Cold Gentleman or whatever that Ralph Tresvant hit album that Jimmy did. So anyway, I don't know how I ended up in the limo, but we met our management. Anyway, that's how I ended up in Minneapolis checking out it. And it was my first experience there, and it seemed pretty cool. And just meeting some people, it was then I got invited back up after that. Sonia was doing a all-female all-star jam session. And she wanted me to play drums. And so I came up for that. And it was Jafita Steele and some she sung. And it was a great band, just all female. And that's where I met Craig Rice for the first time. He was in the audience. It was at the State Music, State Auditorium. And we played there, and it was for homeless benefit. And I met Craig Rice there that night. That was the first night, and it was in 91 and end of 91 because it was really cold. So it was definitely that time, early 92 maybe. And I decided there that this was the spot for me. And I packed my stuff up and moved up in 92.
Legacy Connection Point, Philanthropy. Jacqui and Craig Rice meet at a benefit concert and ultimately establish and lead PRN Alumni Foundation, built on Prince's philanthropic interests. Who else wants to tackle that question next?
I forgot what the question was.
What were you doing prior to joining Prince, and if he was even on your radar to work for?
Ruth, I know I was boring. Sorry.
You were not boring. You just took us on a journey, and I was very involved in the journey that I totally forgot what the question was.
You're so sweet.
I get very invested in your stories, Jacqui, and therefore I am like in the moment with you. I was there in the limo with Jimmy Jam and Roth Tresvant. And we were, I don't know what his song was, but it was probably some very cool R&B song that I was in the limo with you. You took me there.
Good.
But as far as Audrey's question is concerned, good morning. This is Ruth. Prince was not on the radar. He was only on the radar at our church's prayer list. And that's pretty much about it. That's pretty much all I knew about Prince for the longest. And then, so working for him was never something I wanted to do, because when I moved to, I moved to LA to pursue it, very in line with Jacqui, to pursue a career in music. I wanted to be a songwriter and or background singer. But I was really young when I moved to LA, and I got screwed over by a lot of people. And I just decided, I was like, you know what? I can't deal with these music people. They are like so shady. Not all of them, but you know what I mean? Like when you're starting out and you have a quote unquote producer, and they just take your money and they don't give you anything. And just the whole thing is whatever. So I just kind of got a little disillusioned and said, but I love to, I love to write. My musical journey did not go very far. I ended up coming to LA anyway. And I got a job working at the studios. So I worked at Universal Pictures and made my way into the development, which is where they green light and you read scripts and development happens, and where the big major motion pictures come to life. And that during the time that I worked there, I worked for the executives that I worked for vice president, and then I worked for the chairman. But during my time, I think it was Gladiator, Born Identity, Fast and the Furious. Like that was all from Universal Pictures during a big boon for them. And I learned a lot there. And there's a different side, a very corporate side, where I was able to glean a lot of information from, and like very high corporate strategy meetings that I was able to participate in as being the junior exec under the chairman. And it was definitely something that I was like very interested in until I realized there's not a lot of autonomy in that. So you kind of, the way the studio system works is a little contrary to how I was feeling at the time, and the sort of things that were getting green light I didn't agree with, but there were like not enough Black and brown people on the screen at the time. Fast and the Furious, I think, was the first one that they really started to incorporate it with more production dollars. And I just thought, well, you know what, let me try my hand. I was writing a lot, and I started creating like storylines and scripts. And I had Jonathan Demme, the late director. He was doing a movie with the studio at the time, and while he would always come early to his meetings, and while he would wait for my boss, he would sit and talk to me. And he was the one who encouraged me to move to New York and come write and start pitching my stuff out there. And I thought, I've always been in love with New York. I thought, let me go and do this. And as I was transitioning out of that, like I gave my notice. It was the end of 2003. And I was looking, flying back to New York, looking for apartments when this opportunity for a summer gig fell into my lap. And I was asked, like, hey, do you want this summer job? And I was like, doing what? And they were like, well, you would be Prince's assistant. And I said, well, have you ever been a personal assistant? I said, no, but I mean, like, how hard can it be?
Famous last words.
Famous last words.
Good Lord, girl.
Yeah, girl, Jacqui knows, Lisa knows. But yeah, no, I ended up going.
But it was presented to you as a summer job, like
yeah, it was on tour to go on tour with Prince for musicology.
Okay.
And so I went and I interviewed with the publicist at the time, the late and great Ronnie Lippin, and she was lovely, and warned me, like, he's a bit mercurial. Can you handle that? And I was like, please, like, you have not met my mother. And the history of people that I've worked for. Like, I've worked with very highly volatile individuals. So I was like, yeah, this is not going to be a big deal. I don't care. But so I interviewed, and they ended up hiring someone else. And I was like, that's fine. I was still on my trajectory to go to New York. Like, I wasn't even worried about it because it was something that presented itself to me. And I thought, 3 months or 4 months on the road, I can save money. I won't have to find an apartment right away. And
you could still write.
I could still write. I was like, yeah, no problem. So when it didn't happen, it didn't faze me. I just kept on, I was letting go my apartment. I hadn't let the lease go yet because I still hadn't found a place, but I was slowly starting to pack up stuff that I may want to keep and put them, in storage. And so I ended up getting a call, maybe within the month, a couple of weeks. And that other assistant did not last, bless her heart. So apparently I was probably like the fourth person to come in. And that probably should have been a warning. I'm sorry.
Red flags.
Isn't that always the question that one asks? It's like, well, what happened to the person that had this position before me? Right.
Yes.
I mean, I did ask and I did talk to she's actually a great woman. The woman that came before me. She ended up managing the Forum after her small stint. She worked at House of Blues, and then she ended up managing the Forum. Her name is Tina. And she and then she ended up managing, I don't know if she's still there, but she was handling all the logistics for Madison Square Garden. So, and Prince loved to take credit for that. He's like, you see how Tina's doing now? That's because she got to come up, right? Like Prince gave her the come up. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Tina would have been on her like trajectory with or without you. But okay, go ahead and take a little bit of that shine, brother. But I mean that's kind of the thing. I know Lisa and Jacqui know this about Prince, that he would want us on some level to use his name because that's part of like our notch, right? He's not a notch on the belt. He's like a big gold star on our forehead. Because once you work with him, you kind of it is working with Prince is an all access pass because
he knew it too.
He did, which is I think why he would do some of the antics that he would do because he knew he could kind of get away with it.
Absolutely. I got to say one thing that for me, this is Jackie, and Lisa, you got to chime in here, man. The time that I've had since I've been with my and left, I started my entrepreneurial journey, and I would have it on my resume or bio, but I had other like pretty substantial people on there. I mean, and it would always they'd go, "What? You work for Prince?" I was like, "Oh my God." And so I just kind of embraced it. I was like, well, I guess that's it's pretty crazy, and it's still like this to this day.
Yeah, it's instant credibility because I work with a lot of men in the audio industry, and I can always say, like, look, I recorded Prince. Like, what do you think this is here? I recorded Prince.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Oh no, I think I'm done because I think she was just asking, where we were, right? What were we doing before, and then
what were you doing prior?
We got the gig, and was Prince ever on the radar? And he was not. He just kind of. I've had like run-ins with Prince though, and my roommate when I moved to LA was a huge Prince fan on the creepy, scary level. And so I really was not like, I really did think about it before, like when they had asked me, I was like, oh, let me think about that for a second. Cautious about the idea of working for Prince and all that could entail.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in before Paisley. Okay, so I definitely lived my life and career on faith, and after high school, I grew up in Massachusetts, but I was born in Minneapolis, and most of my family was there. So after I graduated high school, I started on my collegiate journey and went to a couple different schools, and I ended up in audio school in Minneapolis. And but I had been going to school for business because I always wanted to be a businesswoman. So, but when I got to Minneapolis, I was hanging out with my aunt, and she was a singer at the time, and she had a couple different producers. She had this one guy, Sparky, who I think he worked with Prince back in the day. But so Sparky was one of her producers, and he had like a basement studio, like a little home studio. And we're talking about 2001, 2002. So it was back when computers, people were starting to do more music on computers. That transition between analog and digital was happening. Mm-hmm. And then one of her other producers was Morris Hayes. So we go to Morris's house. He had this incredible home studio. Like, I mean, just every piece of gear you could imagine, every light and fader, like what the hell, what is all this doing? So I got exposed to the studio life, and I knew I didn't want to be the artist or even the musician. But when I started to see myself in the studio and see my place, I just totally caught the bug. Like I was a studio rat from then on. And so Morris was like, oh, my best friend is starting this school, Institute of Production and Recording. You should go. So that's where I met Jack Robinson. And then I got taught by all these people who had worked for Prince. So I kind of became groomed to be at Paisley at some point. And it was definitely something for every audio engineer in Minneapolis for sure would aspire to work at Paisley Park. And I went to audio school for production. So I learned production. I was a studio, and I learned engineering as well. Engineering got me into a lot of rooms, but I love production. Like production was my everything. Like it's more than just the engineering. It's everything. So, I was basically getting taught by Tom Tucker, who was an engineer, mix engineer for Prince. And then Paul Peterson, just all this kind of royalty that had been around Prince was, and then of course Jacqui was one of my mentors. Jack Robinson introduced me to Jacqui, and Jacqui, you remember that I got to assist you on a shoot in New York?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It was wasn't it Funk Master Flex? Or no, what was it?
I can't even remember the details.
Remember.
I just remember it was just fabulous, and I was just like, oh my God, Jacqui's so cool. I can do anything. Like it just gave me a lot of courage to go out there, because audio engineering, it's still male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And for sure white male dominated. So it's like I was out here, young black woman, just hanging with the guys, and it's a different kind of mode, which we all know that you have to kind of go into when you're in a male dominated industry. But I was on fire. Like I was so excited about everything. And so going through school, yes, I aspired to work for Prince, but at that time, what I knew of Paisley Park, that it was dark, like it was in disrepair, like it was jacked up.
Mm-hmm.
So I never knew, like, oh wow, I could actually work for Prince. Like what? But so at the same time, basically the same time I was in school, around this, like ending school, is when Dave Hampton was in Paisley Park fixing it up and getting it ready for Prince to come back and record.
In secret, right?
Yeah, in secret. So yeah, I was definitely getting prepared. I was learning digital techniques, but I also was learning analog techniques, because at IPR they taught you, we basically had all the same gear as Paisley Park. So we got taught the same type of gear and how to approach the analog recording and certain things, because I think that they did want, hopefully, people to be able to work at Paisley from that school.
That concludes part 1 of this episode. Please follow, share, subscribe so that you'll be notified when part 2 is available. And I will see you next time on the couch.